even before the White House announced Singapore on June 12 as the location and date for the summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong Un and American President Donald Trump. Pundits and scholars had been analyzing this historic meeting from all angles. Between what is guaranteed to be massive pomp and a dizzying amount of photos ops, the two leaders will actually sit across from one another and engage in talks, with the main subject likely to be the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. How these talks will go is anyone's guess, but a look at Trump's negotiations as an American president can serve as one basis for analysis. President Trump has tweeted, "I like making deals, preferably big deals. That's how I get my kicks." By starting off from the extreme position, his negotiation tactics as president have been described as hostage-taking. Some of the hostages have included the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, the Korea-US Free Trade Agreement, trade with China, and tariffs on steel and aluminum, among others. When the White House first announced tariffs on aluminum 10% and steel 25% imports in early March of this year, an American official said they would be applied across the board with no exemptions. The following months then saw exemptions for many countries and extensions on implementation for others, including Canada and Mexico, the European Union, Australia, South Korea, and some South American nations. Canada and Mexico are also locked in negotiations with the U.S. over NAFTA. A favorite target of President Trump, he has called the agreement a terrible, terrible disaster, and threatened to rip it up many times. After 7 rounds of talks between trade representatives in the past year, the administration's negotiators just missed the May 18 deadline for submission to the U.S. Congress, which must approve any trade deal. This means the next round will not begin until next year, after U.S. congressional and Mexican presidential elections. South Korea has also been a prominent subject of Trump's rhetorical wrath. From the campaign trail, he called the Korea-US FTA horrible, and was willing to tie economic and security issues by threatening to order the American military personnel out of South Korea. He also stated that he might wait to start renegotiations until after negotiating with North Korea, in order to gain leverage over Seoul, what he called his very strong card. Washington has begun its pre-negotiation tactics with Pyongyang. Photo, Department of Defense. In the end, negotiations with South Korea finished relatively quickly. Slightly amended FTA lower Korean steel exports to the United States in exchange for an expanded quota on American automobiles in the South Korean market, something American automakers did not even reach before expansion. No reports on how many kicks President Trump got from the deal. In nearby China, perhaps the ultimate Trump target, the American president threatened $100 billion in tariffs, including a 7-year ban on American companies selling to Chinese telecom giant ZTE. However, in early May, Trump announced he will help that same company get back in business. Additionally, the two sides have decided to refrain from placing import tariffs on each country's goods after the second round of negotiations, thereby averting a trade war, even though, according to Trump, trade wars are good and easy to win. Other instances have seen President Trump follow through on threats, but the results are up for debate. As promised, he pulled the United States out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership (TPP), another disaster, and Paris Climate Accords very early in his tenure. Both organizations have continued without the United States. I like making deals, preferably big deals. That's how I get my kicks. These examples show two patterns. Trump either leaves a deal entirely, expecting the opposition to bend to his will, Iran, Paris Climate Accord, TPP, or renegotiates a result that doesn't look much different from the original conditions, tariffs, porous FTA, possibly NAFTA. uncharted territory. Negotiations with North Korea will be different for two reasons. The first is that so far, Trump has only attempted to tear up previously negotiated agreements, but with North Korea, any deal will be his creation. Second, and more importantly, he has never as president negotiated with an adversary like Kim Jong Un. There is no one in the world like the North Korean leader. No other head of a country as small and vulnerable commands as much international attention and influence. Kim comes from a dynasty that has consolidated power through one family line, eliminating all challengers, even members of that family. The internal surveillance state in North Korea penetrates so deeply that any type of coalition of dissatisfied elites or other group has no chance to mobilize. Throw in complete control of internal media by the state, and Kim can easily come away from this summit with no tangible concessions and keep his job. In other words, Kim will not be an easy hostage. What's more, he has already pulled off a public relations coup by appearing energetic and humane in a highly publicized inter-Korean summit. By establishing an affable image and receiving symbolic backing from China through 2 visits with Xi Jinping in the past month, he has gotten off to a head start in the race for public diplomacy. If meeting with Trump goes sour, the burden will be on the American president. Negotiation games have begun. Washington has begun its pre-negotiation tactics with Pyongyang. Reports are that Trump plans to demand denuclearization without hinting at any concessions, known as the Big Bang approach. Supporting this position, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, during his second trip to Pyongyang, said, "We will not relieve sanctions until such time as we have achieved our objectives. We are not going to do this in small increments." Trump has never as president negotiated with an adversary like Kim Jong Un. Photo, Joint Inter-Korean Summit Press Corps. National Security Advisor John Bolton stated that the administration is currently looking at the Libyan model for denuclearization. This, too, is obviously a ploy, like a hungry cat guaranteeing safety to a mouse. North Korea watched closely when former dictator Muammar Gaddafi gave up his nukes in 2003 at the behest of the international community, and was toppled and executed by his countrymen in 2011 with backing of NATO. Beijing may feel less inclined to play bad cop with Pyongyang while Washington is making its own threats against China. Trump's team is clearly trying to gain an upper hand pre-summit, but one major disadvantage for the American president is his preference for direct and bilateral negotiations. Diplomacy is rarely conducted in a vacuum, and cooperation with China, among others, will be necessary. Beijing's change from its role as protector of North Korea at the United Nations Security Council to co-signer of sanctions contributed to the economic squeeze that Trump supporters claim is responsible for bringing Kim to the table. This cooperation may have limits. Beijing may feel less inclined to play bad cop with Pyongyang while Washington is making its own threats against China. On the upcoming summit drive, Chan Young-bang of KIMEP has argued that America can't achieve its desired outcome alone because the United States, in all its military might, wields no direct coercive measures over Pyongyang. In other words, if President Trump wants his so-called big deal, he must coordinate with other stakeholders. North Korea will certainly come to the summit well-versed in the school of Trump negotiation style, which so far has been high on adjectives but low on substance. Seeing the American president constantly threaten to bring the storm and end with a light shower will be a factor, for a country that continues to survive, against the odds, 3 decades after the end of the Cold War. In the same Get My Kicks tweet, Trump said negotiation was his art form. If he can somehow strike the right deal with Kim Jong Un, maybe the world may see him as the negotiation artist that he sees himself as. Edited by Oliver Hotham. Featured image, White House.